Tipflation article that came out yesterday, which highlighted something that I've been feeling. I just didn't really realize it until I read this. The title, Tired of Tipflation. If you feel like you're being asked to tip practically everywhere these days, you're not alone. People are really feeling imposed upon. We're already living through inflationary times. Everything is crazy expensive. And on top of that, you're being asked every time you turn around, how much would you like to tip? It feels pushy, it feels needy, and almost every customer I speak with says, why aren't businesses just paying people more? Okay, I'm gonna talk about when we should and shouldn't tip, but just talking about that kind of point alone, why aren't businesses just paying people more? Inflation impacts businesses as well. The inflation is, for a business operates off income, expenses, and then their net. When expenses increase because of inflation, there's less money to be made as the business. Now, the argument you'll hear is, well, the business just pushes the increased cost off to the customer, which would be more of what we experience with inflation from a purchasing standpoint. But all of that is at play for all of us, whether you're a small business owner, you're an employee, you're just living life, it is more expensive. So it's hard to just say, I'm gonna pay the employee more so they shouldn't tip. That's gonna make its way all the way down to the customer as well. Going in when you should and should not tip. This is something that I wasn't really taught this. I just thought you always tip no matter what. And right now they're actually putting pressure on you where it makes you feel like you have to. But if you work behind a counter, let's say you're a barista, you're working the cashier, this is a position that you're paid a wage for. Your income isn't reliant on tips like maybe a server would be. So if you're at the cashier and you've got your iPad, you, the customers, just pay for something, they switch it over and put the 15, 20, 25% yes or no, you don't need to tip there. That person is not in a position that usually requires a tip, so don't feel like you're being pressured into have to do so. You really do not. For open bar events, if you go to an event, there's an open bar, usually they have a tip jar. Now, you can tip if you want, but just know, the person that's working the event, they've been paid and tipped by the person hosting. So they've already received a tip for being there. If you want to tip them on top of that, you totally can. But you don't have to. They have already been given a tip to be there. Double tipping. This is something that my wife mentioned, or if you're somebody who goes to salons and gets maybe your nails done. Sometimes you'll see the person that's doing your nails, like the technician, you'll tip them. Then you'll go to pay at the cashier for the actual salon, and they'll ask you to tip there as well. That's a double tip. You don't need to do that. I think that's just a business trying to get more money out of you. If you paid the technician a tip, you are all good there. For poor service, this is one that I actually think is a little bit harder to get right. Now, if you go and get your hair cut, right, and they just completely destroy your hair, I think it's totally okay if you're like, I'm not tipping you, you've just created a mess out of this. I think at restaurants is where it gets a little bit more challenging to figure out what to do. If you have somebody who's a server and they're just terrible, they're rude, they're short with you, the experience with them is just not pleasant, I think you have some discretion on maybe bringing your tip down. I think treating it as a sliding scale is actually okay. Where if 20% is maybe the benchmark, if you wanted to bring it down to let's say 10, or some people just don't tip at all if it's a terrible server. But what I would kind of challenge you on this one is sometimes at restaurants when we get frustrated, it's not entirely the server's fault. If it's a busy restaurant or your food takes a long time to come out, or there's something about the restaurant's atmosphere that is not enjoyable, I think dinging the server is actually not appropriate. They're kind of doing the best they can in the scenario they're at. So I would say think about that one before you choose not to tip them. If it is them kind of maybe a poor attitude, or you feel like you just got a terrible service from them, the individual, I think it's probably good to like discreetly, or maybe you just have to ask them straight up, go speak to the manager and kind of just bring it to their attention that you had a poor experience with that individual. Maybe mention that it wasn't the total restaurant's issue and then go from there. But I think 10% in my perspective is kind of the floor. Going no tip on somebody, I think, is actually a hard move. I wouldn't recommend it. But I think a sliding scale between 20 and 10 is actually good.